Hello, my name is Ryan. I make music under the name Sleeping at Last, and as you may already know, this is the Sleeping at Last podcast. Welcome. Every time I sit down to record an episode of this thing, I am so overwhelmed with a few feelings. Number one, I am deeply, deeply touched that anyone presses play, and I mean that. And I get to take the time to talk through so much of my music with you, and I get to explain the meaning behind my songs and to show you different details and aspects of my recordings. That is such a gift. Number two, it's just me making this thing by myself, so sitting down to hear myself talk for this long is tricky. It is the need to stop and re-record because I sounded silly or said something wrong, and not to mention the editing, and it's just a lot of me to be confronted with. But like songwriting, like playing shows, making this thing is really vulnerable, and I'm grateful for the invitation to be vulnerable and to get to share this all with you, no matter how uncomfortable it can sometimes feel. And number three, taking the time to talk through these songs as they release gives me a really unique perspective, kind of a bird's eye view of where I'm at in this Atlas project. Usually I've got my head down making these songs and I'm not really paying attention to anything outside of the song that I'm working on in that moment. And recording these episodes is just a really great opportunity to take a bit of stock of where I am in this Atlas adventure. I've probably talked about this ad nauseum, but in case you don't already know, Atlas is a long form collection of songs, a massive concept album, if you will. And when I reach the finish line, which is now very, very much in view, there will be a total of 80 songs throughout Atlas. And the songs we're going to talk about today are called Source and Echo, and they are the 71st and 72nd songs in Atlas. Isn't that wild? Granted, I've been working on this thing for so long now. I kind of just can't believe how far I've traveled here in this same project. It makes me really proud. All this to say, getting to record these episodes means a lot to me and does a lot of good in me. So thank you so much for listening and for letting me share all this with you. Today's songs, Source and Echo, as you probably can already tell, they're what I like to call sibling songs in that they are related to one another, two sides of the same coin. So let's go ahead and talk about Source first, followed by Echo. So to get started, here is the 71st song in my Atlas project, Source. Quiet down, an avalanche is waiting for just one more sound. Life is loud, look at all we've gotten away with up till now, and I don't want to find out where the line is. Stuck looking over my shoulder, another domino tipping over. Maybe we should wait for the morning light before we let our voices had so much fun recording that song. One of the creative rules that I had in mind when I was writing Source and Echo, which we'll talk about in a minute, was that I had to approach the writing and the recording as an act of play. I had to make it fun. I wanted it to be a little bit reckless in that process where I just tried anything, kind of like no bad ideas. And that path is a little unlike most of the songs where I have a very specific vision and aim in mind. And there's still an element of exploration in everything that I'm working on, especially in the production. But it's mostly trying to make the thing that I'm already hearing in my head. But for Source, I tried really hard to just kind of let it be whatever it's going to be, and Echo as well as just this kind of open canvas of sorts. Beyond just being super fun to do, there are a handful of reasons as to why I went in this more abstract, more free-spirited direction in making Source and Echo. So one reason is because Source and Echo are essentially about cause and effect. So each choice I was making, whether it was writing a lyric or a layer of sound, I was making that choice individually and kind of following where it led to next. And I really like that spirit of kind of like in this and this and this kind of thinking, because it felt like the songwriting version of cause and effect. Another reason I chose to approach this song in this way is that there's a theme of protecting the natural world throughout these two songs, Source and Echo. And so I really, really like the idea of letting these songs sort of develop organically as much as possible to kind of allow them become whatever it is they want to become. And this idea is inspired by Spiral Dynamics' Green, which is something we'll get into in a little bit. And far more weirdly, I kept thinking about trees in the making of both of these songs. And so I was recording each layer. I just kind of had this visual of a forest in my head. And I feel super weird saying that out loud, but it was somehow really helpful, kind of an interesting light to hold each of my ideas up to. Like, does this sound green? Does this sound like a tree? This actually kind of sounds like leaves. I kind of regret sharing all of that. So yeah, I'm going to leave it in anyway, though. You guys should be aware of the weird headspace I'm in when I'm writing some of these songs. Before I get too much further, I did want to point out the absolutely stunning strings at the front of Source and throughout the song. They were, of course, recorded by the most wonderful people, Sharon and Anya Katerina Gerber, my friends and longtime collaborators. At some point, I'm going to go back through all of these episodes and just make a super cut of me saying how amazing Sharon and Anya are. Truly, I mean every single word of it. They're wonderful, and getting to make music with them is absolutely one of my greatest joys. I am just happy to be a broken record about it, and yeah, it is such a gift to get to keep making stuff with them. Originally in this string arrangement, I had the strings starting later in the song, but once Sharon and Anya sent the strings back to me and I got to hear these recordings, I just found myself wanting to solo them out and hear nothing else but the strings. And so that led to me thinking this song should begin in that way. We should only hear the strings. It sort of sets up the idea of the rest of the song. For the arrangement of this one, I sang the parts, which always just sounds so ridiculous, but I also feel like it's kind of fun to hear. It gives you an even greater appreciation for the incredible work that Sharon and Anya do to be able to turn something as silly as this into this. As I mentioned earlier, Source and Echo are sibling songs, meaning they were written with each other in mind, again, kind of like two sides of the same coin. Just like the approach I took for my songs Hurt and Heal, Believe and Doubt, Build and Destroy, Asleep and Awake. So there are all sorts of different ways that source and echo are related to one another. But the one way that I am the most proud of, or at least the most excited by, was that I hid the lyrics to echo inside the lyrics to source. So let me try to explain. The lyrics for Echo are very simple. It's a repeated poem that I wrote and I just sung over and over and over in this song, as you'll soon hear when we get to talking more about Echo. But those lyrics are: light pools in the trees and becomes leaves, and I realize I feel like every living thing, better off with sunlight. So the thinking was Echo needs a source. And so I took all of those lyrics, all of those words, and hid them in plain sight throughout the lyrics of Source. It's a bit easier to understand visually, but if you looked at all of the lyrics to Source, you can find every word used in Echo. I posted on Instagram where you can see the lyrics to Source, and then I made the hidden lyrics to Echo in bold. This is very, very hard to explain in words, but hopefully you kind of understand the idea. Source is the source of those words, and then echo is the echo of those words. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, the main theme throughout Atlas 3 is voluntary human development. In other words, it's about what we do with all that we are, all of our choices. And so the order of all of these themes in Atlas 3 were kind of laid out loosely inspired by spiral dynamics. And if you are unfamiliar with what spiral dynamics is, in a nutshell, it's a model of human development that says people tend to organize their values and their worldviews into different levels or memes. Spiral dynamics was developed by Don Beck and Christopher Cohen, and it was built around the earlier work of Clare Graves. And there are heaps of books on the concept, and I just found the idea of spiral dynamics really, really helpful in knowing what order these concepts that I was exploring in Atlas 3 should be arranged. So the songs Source and Echo begin the green level, or the green V meme in spiral dynamics, which emphasizes empathy, equality, and care for both people and the natural world. It often shows up in reaction to like the perceived failures of the earlier value systems and V memes, especially like rigid authority or like competition and materialism. It like sees the cause and effect and the cost of those choices. In other words, green just cares a lot about the impact of our choices. And that is primarily what I wrote the song Source about. While I was researching green in spiral dynamics and thinking through this song, I kept having a visual pop up in my mind of someone shushing their friends. And I had this mental image of a group of people walking alongside a cavernous mountain range. Of course, that's where an echo would be. And they're sort of tiptoeing as they go. And the person that is shushing them is just deeply afraid of an avalanche. So I examined this idea of cause and effect. Is that person really afraid of the group making too much noise that would cause the avalanche? Or is that person just afraid that their existence might cause the avalanche? I'm that person. I'm deeply uncomfortable with disturbing my environment or the people around me, that I end up kind of welling up with this unreasonable fear. And like all of my anxieties or fears or catastrophizing, it has a huge cost in my enjoyment of life. And this showed up in me as a parent too. When my girls were really little and were doing what kids do, being loud, I feel like I shushed them far more than I wish I had, all in the service of making sure there's no possibility that anyone around us will be disturbed. And I think there's a middle, not only as a parent, but just as a person, that I personally have always struggled to find of being considerate while also letting things be. And that middle is what I wrote the song about. The first half of the song is all about being overly cautious and being so terrified of what might happen. And then the second half is an attempt at this balance, this middle that I'm talking about, which is probably best described in this lyric. Every living thing gets better by ricocheting off each other.
Every living thing gets better by ricocheting off each other.
So by choosing to not bump up against the world, we stay static. And so this song is a wrestling match with that idea. A little Easter egg hidden at the front of the song. So right before I sing the very first lyric, quiet down, an avalanche is waiting for just one more sound. You can barely hear a shushing. And so I recorded that into the vocal take, and I wanted to make sure that you could feel it more than you could hear it. So it's barely audible, but it is in there. As I was thinking through the idea of sound causing this metaphorical avalanche in the song, I made the early decision to make sure that this song and Echo were meant to be heard as loud as you feel comfortable hearing it. And so that informed some of the intention of like this pile up of layers in the sound to just try to make something that sounded loud. The instructions to listen to this song loud is actually written into the song itself. It's in this lyric.
Let's turn the volume up before our song ends. Everything echoes, it's just a matter of when.
Oh, and right there where I stopped, there's a sound that's sort of this bell tone, and this is incredibly dorky, but I feel like I need to mention it because every time I hear it, it does make me so happy. I recorded this instrument called a tongue drum, and it's this little tiny, maybe 7-inch orb of metal that has these tines carved out into them, and it makes these bell tones. And so I recorded that. I loved how it sounded in the song. And now every time there's something about it, every time I hear this section, it reminds me of when you're on the ride, the Jungle Cruise in Disney World. You go into this cave and there is this soundtrack there that's just this kind of ambient, what sounds like that instrument. And I love it so much. So every time this part plays, it reminds me of the Jungle Cruise, and it brings my heart much joy. Another little Easter egg is that I hid a bit of audio from Echo into this song. So in addition to making sure that the lyrics of Echo are hidden throughout the lyrics of Source, as I mentioned earlier, I also wanted to make sure that there was a bit of the actual music kind of snuck into this song as well. It's pitched and altered, but here's what it sounds like. That definitely sounds kind of alien. And that happens roughly at around like 2 minutes and 15 seconds in Source. Very subtly tucked into the mix. Again, just trying to make sure that this source can be echoed through the song Echo. That may be the most confusing sentence I've ever said, but you get what I'm trying to do. Okay, a few thoughts on some of the lyrics in this song. What becomes of a world unwritten when our joy and pain is hidden?
What becomes of a world unwritten? When our joy and pain is hidden.
I recently read a book called The Giver for the first time, which I completely loved. Apparently, most people have read this out of like middle school, but I had not. I had missed it and was delighted to read it as a 40-something-year-old. And hearing those lyrics now reminds me so much of the heart of the book, which is strange because I wrote those words just a few months before I actually started reading The Giver. And it makes me really happy in retrospect because those lyrics feel kind of like my takeaway from that book. If our experience in life was too comfortable without pain or joy, our lives would be deeply limited and so much magic and beauty would be muted. And so I love that there's this reference or this kind of nod to that meaningful book in this song, even if it was coincidental. What I was actually trying to get at in that lyric is that the person in the song, definitely me, is obsessing over caution and what ifs and is catastrophizing endlessly. And that won't actually have the results that I might hope it will. And I know this deep down. And so these lyrics are that realization that change is necessary, that letting go of control is necessary, or rather letting go of the illusion of control. And I've said this a million times before, but I keep realizing that essentially all of the 80 songs in Atlas are, and maybe all the songs I've ever written, are in one way or another about letting go. For me, letting go, and which is really just acceptance, that is going to be my lifelong lesson. It is the thing that I will struggle with until my last day. And there's so much hope in that when I think about it, because obviously it's frustrating. It goes against my hardwiring. But the answer being acceptance is actually this really beautiful exhale, and I'm glad to be learning it. So writing these songs is sort of like my version of like a Post-it note that just keeps reminding me of this truth over and over and over again. The turning point in this song is in the following lyrics. I realize I'm being too careful. There's solid ground here in the middle. And like the tide sways under the thumb of the moon, I feel like we play our part too.
I realize I'm being too careful. There's solid ground here in the middle. And like the tide sways under the thumb of the moon, I feel like we play our part too. I'm getting lost.
It's about balance, and that's really the heart of the song. The letting go isn't a forfeit, it's a finding a balance point. And so the following line that is about the tide swaying under the thumb of the moon, and we play our part too, that points to this balance kind of landing in a realization that no matter what, we do have an impact in our environment. And so we're not meant to control our environment, but we certainly impact it by merely existing. And that impact doesn't have to be a harmful thing or a thing to fear or a negative thing at all. It can be something beautiful, like the moon moving the tides. And I think that ties into the Green level in Spiral Dynamics. At its best, Green sees the impact of all that came before it and just wants to unify and protect it. In other words, Green is all about harmony. And so in all three of the songs that are going to represent Green, Source, Echo, and the following song, Parallel Universe, Philia, I made sure each of them contained vocal harmonies and just stacks of background vocals, which felt like the best way to represent that beautiful part of Green in Spiral Dynamics. One more little Easter egg sound hidden in this song. I wrote this song in London, and I remember walking around listening to just the instrumental of it because the music came first, and I was still kind of wrapping my head around the idea of what I wanted it to say and how I wanted to sing. And so I was thinking through the lyrics, just listening to the instrumental. And it took many, many days to even begin writing down the first lyric because I was just sort of absorbing the song first. So the background sounds of London felt like they kind of belonged in the music in some way because of this. So throughout the song, you can hear bits of London, whether it's sounds from the parks, sounds just walking around, and then the one I'm going to show you right now is recorded on the tube on the Central line.
This Central Line train to Epping.
There's a whole bunch more to say about Source, but I think now is a good time to switch gears and talk about its sibling song, Echo. I wrote Echo in London as well, and this song began as a poem that I wrote in this gorgeous park in London. I was taking a break in the middle of a rehearsal just to have a quick lunch in the park, and there was this gorgeous sunlight pouring in through the trees, and I just felt this deep gratitude for the moment, and so I wrote a short poem. The one I read earlier, which is, of course, hidden throughout Source, as I mentioned. And shortly after, I wrote the music for Echo, and I felt like it sounded a bit like the feeling that I wrote the poem about. Anyway, let's go ahead and listen to Echo, and then I will talk a whole bunch more about how it was made. This is Echo.
Light pulls in the trees and becomes leaves, and I realize I feel like every living thing better off with some light, with some light, with some light. Light pours in the trees and becomes leaves, and I realize I feel like every living thing better off with some light, with some light, with some light. Light pours in the trees and becomes leaves, and I realize I feel like every living thing better off with some light, 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 with
way the sunlight moved through the branches in the park that day, it made these really beautiful and delicate shadow patterns on everything. And something about it was just so hypnotic and beautiful. And so that was kind of the aim of writing Echo, was to try to recreate that feeling. And a huge part of that was recording the vocal layers. After I wrote some of the music in this song, normally I would play around with a melody and just sort of sing gibberish lyrics until I found something that I liked. But this time, again, in the same spirit I mentioned earlier about approaching both of these songs with a sort of freedom, trying anything and everything and kind of seeing where it lands, I decided to sing this poem over and over and over. And rather than try to get a vocal take that I liked, I just would add another track and then sing again, and then some harmonies on top of that. And this carried on until I felt like there was enough there to sculpt. And it was so much fun. The vocal takes themselves were super rough and wobbly, and normally I'd want to get better performances, but there was something about each layer that sort of felt like it needed to be unedited, and that felt the most natural and just the right feel for this hypnotic song.
Light pulls in the trees and becomes leaves, and I realize I feel like every living thing better off with some light, with some light, with some light. Light pulls in the trees and becomes leaves, and I realize I feel like every living thing better off with some light, with some light, with some light. Light pulls in the trees and becomes leaves, and I realize I feel like every living thing better off with some light, 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 with some light.
I haven't decided yet, but I might put out an a cappella version of this song at some point. I'm not sure, but this was all so incredibly fun to record these layers and to build this song out. And I'm sure at this point it's so obvious, but the idea of repeating the lyrics over and over is, of course, because the song is called Echo. And that feeling of watching the sunlight through the leaves felt like a moment that I hoped to repeat over and over and over, that sense of gratitude. And so repeating these lyrics also is a kind of mantra. The strings that you hear throughout Echo were recorded again by Sharon and Anya Katerina Gerber, who so beautifully translated my vocal recordings of me singing string parts into real cellos and real violins. And I cannot speak highly enough about their performances and their layers here. Their hearts in this song is exactly what the song was needing. And getting these recordings back, I remember just it feeling so overwhelmingly emotional because they just add so much depth to this song that became this kind of important mantra in my life. I'm a little hesitant to share this next thing because I think it risks me sounding like a total egomaniac, but there's a moment in this song that I think is one of my favorite moments throughout the music that I've made. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's this downbeat and start of this groove that just feels good to me in a way that I wasn't expecting when I was writing and when I was producing this. But this is the section that I'm talking about. And I'm not exactly known for any sort of like groove in my music, but there's just something about this moment that was a surprise in my experimenting that I just really enjoyed hearing. And now as I hear it back, I still just have this really good feeling in that moment of the song. And I have this really nice memory attached to this moment. I was working on this song in my flat in London, and both of my girls came into the room. And so I asked them if they wanted to hear what I was working on. And so they both took a moment in the headphones and listened. And right as this moment of the song happened, They both just started dancing to the music, and I just love it so much that they felt like moving to this section of the song. And their dances were definitely like half because they were just being silly, and then the other half was because they were feeling it. And so we laughed a bunch, and I just have that sweet memory attached to this moment of the song. And that as well just makes it one of my favorite moments in my music. Speaking of my daughters, Lily and Iris, after they were dancing their hearts out to this song, I asked if they wanted to sing on it too, and they were kind enough to agree. So you can hear them singing along in several parts of this song, but here they are soloed out.
Light pools in our eyes. Light pools in our eyes. Light pools in our eyes.
And as you can hear, I asked them to sing a different lyric. So instead of light pools in the trees, they sing light pools in our eyes. Something about that felt more personal to me. There are a ton of different layers in this song, and I wanted to point out just a few of them. Some are just kind of silly, some are just interesting. And so first, there is a bit of whistling in this song, which I maybe have whistled in one or two other songs of mine, but it's a rare moment where I feel like a whistle is called for in my own music. You can hear people talking in the background, which makes me remember that when I'm doing all this weird stuff on the microphone, people are listening to me, especially my family, who gets to hear me just making all sorts of weird sounds all day. Speaking of weird sounds, and I'm embarrassed to point this one out, but I did a little bit of beatboxing in this. I don't even know if you could call it that, but there's these moments that I kept hearing that I wanted the percussion to do, and I was like, I can do it with my mouth. I'll just do that. So weird. That was layered into the full like percussion section that I built out, and I like it. So here's the full percussion, all the different instruments I use for that. And that warpy piano that you hear in there, that was me taking the original recording of the piano and then running it through this Teenage Engineering mini recording device that has like this manual wheel that you can spin to kind of almost warp it like tape. And so I just kind of did a controlled, like every time it looped, just had a little bit of warble to it. And I really like how that turned out. And of course, there are a few more Easter eggs hidden throughout the song, and so here are a few of them. As I mentioned, I wrote the poem that became this song in a beautiful park in London, and so I went back to that same park, and I just recorded like the ambient sounds of the park, and so that is included in this song. Also hidden throughout the song, I recorded audio from when my wife and I and our two girls walked in that same park for the very first time when we moved to London. And so I have just a little bit of commentary from the girls as they're walking through. And I loved that it was in that same space that began this poem.
Oh, it's beautiful. That's so pretty.
And one of my favorite things about London is just walking around and just hearing the birds and the various sounds in the city, but especially in the parks. And so I knew that I wanted to make sure that some London birds made their way into this song as well. All sorts of fun layers in this song. If you're curious, there are actually 53 tracks of different sounds in this song. And I'd say that's pretty normal for most of my songs, unless it's like a super acoustic kind of thing. I love layers, and I love being able to hear something, and on the 20th listen, you hear something new. And so that's kind of always what I'm reaching for. Okay, before I wrap up this episode, I did want to point out the phenomenal artwork for these two songs, Source and Echo, which were painted by my longtime collaborator and friend, Alicia Edijanto. Her work is seriously perfect. I am so blown away every single time she paints anything for my music. And I feel so lucky to have her visually representing all of the songs in Atlas 2 and Atlas 3. It is such a gift to get to work with her on all this. When she sent over the artwork for Source, and this is a little bit of her thinking behind her painting. The artwork for Source depicts a single tree from a closer perspective. The woman gently touches the tree while the man looks upward toward the sunlight, symbolizing care, connection, and awareness. It reflects the idea of returning to something rooted and authentic. And for her painting of Echo, she had this to say. In contrast, Echo portrays the trees from a distance. The misty green landscape evokes a softer atmosphere, something that lingers and reverberates, following the mood of the song. I've also included subtle images of birds to emphasize that we share this world with other living beings. The man and the woman calmly gazing across the landscape, with the man stretching one arm outward, an optimistic and hopeful gesture of quietly reaching towards what's ahead. I love all of that so much. It is such a joy to hear her thinking behind the incredible work that she does. So if you haven't seen the artwork for Source and Echo, please go and take a look. Alicia Edijanto, she is the best. Okay, I think that's everything for Source and Echo. I hope you enjoyed hearing how each of these songs came to be. Thank you so much for the privilege of getting to share it all with you. The next song in Atlas is called Parallel Universe Philia and represents the Greek love Philia, which is friendly love, and I am so excited to share that one with you soon. Also, a brand new song in my Atoms project was just released. It's called Atom 17, and it's out everywhere. If you don't know what my Atom project is, it's an ongoing series of tiny songs inspired by tiny, beautiful things that I see and notice, and then I'll take a video of it using my phone, and at some point I'll try to write a short piece of music that feels like that moment of noticing. It's a meditation of sorts. So I'll leave you today with that little piece of music. Again, thank you so much for listening. I really, really appreciate you. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait to talk to you very, very soon. Here is Atom 17.